2018's Panoptical is the fourth album by the band Days of Jupiter. This is another band that has been recommended to me by another YouTube user, Zach White, I think your name is. I have vision problems, so if I've read that name wrong, I do apologize. They're a band from Sweden. They're fairly recent. Their first album came out in 2012. Panoptical is their fourth album. And pretty impressive that it came out only a year or so after their third album, which came out in 2017. What's most impressive about that is that this is their best album. It's pretty amazing that they were able to put out their best album only a year or so after their previous one. They had a lot of different elements to their sound on this one that weren't there on the previous albums. However, they don't change their sound. They still keep the core of who they are as a band. This is actual proper growth as a band. They don't take anything away from what they've done in the past. All they do is add to it. And they do a really nice job at it. I've heard the other three albums, but I've only been listening to this band for about a week, so I've primarily been listening to this album. But one thing I can say, listening to all four albums, is they are really consistent when it comes to songwriting. There aren't a whole lot of songs that I absolutely love, but there aren't any songs that I think are just outright bad either. They keep that same consistency on this album. Now, if you haven't heard this band before, they would fit in well on a radio station with bands like Disturbed, or Alter Bridge, or Tremonti, Shinedown, stuff like that, Godsmack even. And like each of those other bands, they have enough of their own sound that you would be able to tell them apart. So they're definitely not a clone of any other band. The drummer and bassist do solid jobs. It takes a lot for me to really notice the bass or drums on an album. Those aren't really the instruments I focus on, but they do nice jobs. The singer in this band is really good. He's got a really nice voice. He's got some good range. He can do heavier stuff. He can do softer stuff. His voice isn't ultra unique or anything like that, but it's serviceable, and he's got good range to go along with it. The guitar playing is pretty basic. I think within that basic style, he does try to add a few different styles in the mix, but overall, the playing is still fairly simple. I would like to see more kick-ass, memorable guitar riffs in the future, some more technical solos, but I think for a simple guitar style, the guy does a good job of adding some variety. As I said before, the band has really consistent songwriting. My least favorite tracks on this album, I would still give a 6 out of 10. They're still pretty decent tracks. But the best songs on this album, I would probably give an 8 out of 10 to. So they don't really have a whole lot of peaks and valleys in terms of song quality. There are no songs I can't stand, and my least favorite songs by this band are still listenable. But there aren't those songs that, when I see the album cover, when I think of the band, I think to myself, yes, I have to listen to that song. The album opens with the song Swallowed. It's a pretty basic song, something you might expect from a band like this. It has a quiet intro that builds up into a heavier section. The verses are pretty soft with a clean guitar, which has an effect that we'll hear. And the guitars later on in the album too. The chorus is heavier. It's a pretty basic track. I wish there had been more punch to the chorus. But otherwise, it's a pretty decent song. I don't think that this was a good choice for an album opener. It doesn't really draw me in as a listener as much, but it's still a decent track. We All Die Young is next, and this is a much faster-paced, heavier song. This is one of my favorite songs on the album, actually. The verses are really good. It seems to pick up pace a little bit as it builds towards the chorus. And what's really interesting about this song is the chorus itself. The first time we hear it, we're getting some picking on the guitar as the song basically just stops what it's doing. We got some picking on the guitar, and then we got the vocals singing over it, and that's all we get. They go through the next verse, and when they get to the chorus again, this time there's drums playing in there. I think there might be some bass in there as well. So it's kind of building. And then as we go throughout the rest of the song, once we get to the last chorus, now it's a little heavier, and the full band's playing. So it's kind of a cool way of adding a little bit of variety into a not-so-complex song structure by just constantly adding something to a section in the song. It's pretty interesting. Part of me, when I originally heard it, kind of wanted the chorus to just be heavy, but the more I listen to it, the more I really like how they did that. Just a way of giving the song some variety, I think is really cool. I Am Fuel, I've listened to this song less than I have most of the album. It's a slower paced song. It's very much like Swallow, except slower. It's got that same guitar effect during the verses, as it's also kind of a softer song with a heavier chorus. I don't really remember it very well, to be honest with you. It's not an awful track, but not one that really stands out. Why is next? This is the first song I've heard by this band. This was the song that was recommended to me. I think I might have heard it before because I remember having the same experience with this song with another track, so I'm pretty sure it might have been this song, actually. The opening guitar parts and the, I'll say, rhythm of the vocals in the verses remind me way too much of something I've heard before. I'm thinking Shinedown's Enemies, but there might even be something else I know of that this reminds me of even more, and I'm just not thinking of it. There are a few moments like that on this album where I hear something and I think to myself, okay, I've heard that before, but I can't quite place where I heard it. It's still a decent track, but I don't like how similar that verse is to something I've heard before. The chorus is pretty good, and overall it's still a decent song once I got past that little aspect. It's a nice, heavier, kind of upper mid-tempo song, so kind of good to get after a slower paced track. I guess if nothing else, I could say the verses are a little too predictable. One thing kind of interesting about this song, though, is when the guitar solo comes in, the song actually gets quieter. A lot of times when the solo comes in on a song, a band will usually choose to make the song louder, but this band kind of tones everything down a little bit for the solo, which is an interesting change. It becomes a little bit too common within their song structures, so it gets a little boring after a while, but for a song or two, it's kind of an interesting change. The title track, Panoptical, is next. This song is kind of a mid-tempo, maybe slightly upper mid-tempo track. It's got a nice mix of a heavier guitar and some clean guitar strumming in the verse, giving the song a heaviness, yet some melody to it. It's got a really good chorus and a decent solo. Overall, this is one of my favorite tracks on the album as well. Black Halo is next. This song could have gone really wrong really quickly. Fortunately, it does not. The song itself overall is decent. It's an acoustic track with some nice vocals, but there's nothing overwhelmingly special about it. So if this song had dragged on for 4.5 to 5 minutes long, I think it would have been way too long. But since the song is only 3.5 minutes, it's actually a perfect length. There's a 20-second or so acoustic intro that goes into the only verse in the song. And then we get the chorus, which is decent enough, but nothing really standout-ish. And then we get the solo and then another chorus to end the song, which I think is just a perfect way to do this song. And I think it's a nice break from the typical sound that the band has been doing up until this point. I also really like the effect on the guitar during the solo. I know there's something else, another song that I've heard that uses the same effect on their guitar solo, but I can't think of what it is, but it still sounds really cool either way. Sons of War is next, and you would think after an acoustic track we would go balls to the wall heavy again, but they really don't here. It is a heavier track, but it has a melodic intro that lead into the song, and it's still kind of toned down a little bit. It's kind of more of a mid-tempo song. It's pretty decent and it's got a decent solo, but there's not really a whole lot that really stands out to me with this one. The End Will Begin Again is another melodic track. The thing about this song that sets it apart is they do have some violins and some orchestral stuff going on in the background, which does change it up a little bit from the other songs on this album, just adding a little something to it that we haven't heard on the album. It's overall an okay song. It's not one of my favorites, but it's not bad either. Edge of Everything is next, and something about the song I really like. It's not perfect. It's a pretty flawed song. It starts off pretty slow-paced. It seems like a song where they're trying to have a very big and epic feel to it, and I don't think they quite accomplish that. So the first part of the first verse is kind of slow-paced. You got some vocals and a kind of heavy yet melodic guitar riff going on. Not too bad, but then it stops and then they kind of start back up again, but just a little bit faster. And this is the part of the song that I think really could have stood some improvement on. As they were doing this to build towards the chorus, I feel like they should have added something else other than just have the drums pick up the pace a little bit. Either some more guitars or maybe another orchestral thing or some backing vocals. They should have added something to give this section of the song more of a punch to it, to show that they're building towards something. And I think that's really the flaw in this song, is this section here. The chorus I really like. It has a different melody to it. Overall, I still do like this song. It could also use a guitar solo, which most of these songs really could use guitar solos. But I think it could have been better. Shallow Side is next. This song kind of does drag a little bit. One thing about these songs that I haven't mentioned is they're pretty much what you see is what you get. If you've heard the first verse and chorus of a song, except for We All Die Young, pretty much once you've heard the verse and the chorus, you know how the song is going to go. They don't add a whole lot after that point. And like I mentioned, Black Halo is a song that could have gone wrong if they had made that song too much longer. I kind of feel that way a little bit with this song. It's got a cool sound to it. It's got kind of a bluesy intro with some lead guitars going on. I really do like the sound of it a lot. It's a quieter track. The vocals are really good. It's got a good atmosphere to it. The chorus is heavier and a very nice chorus as well. And there's also a pretty decent guitar solo in there. It's just something around the second chorus leading to the guitar solo feels like it takes too long. Now, this could be my own attitude as I was listening to this track before recording this. I have a bunch of things I want to get done today, so in my head I was kind of like, come on, get on with it. So it really could just be the mindset I was in when I listened to this track. It's still really cool and definitely one of the highlights on the album. And the last two tracks, I don't really remember as well. 9 Tons of Lies and Thieves and Legends are both two basic kind of upper to mid-tempo rock tracks. They pick up the heavier pace, finally, after a bunch of mellow songs, but they don't really do a whole lot for me. Again, not bad. My least favorite songs on this album are still solid 6s out of 10. So they're certainly listenable, but they don't really do a whole lot or highlight the album for me at all. This album definitely showed a lot of growth for the band and a lot of potential, and I do really look forward to what they're going to do next. I think that if they continue to build on their sound and add new things to it and new styles, I think they can certainly become an even better band than they are now, as long as they can keep their core sound and keep the consistency in their songwriting. I would like to see the guitar player get a little bit more technical, write a few more kick-ass guitar riffs, show some more impressive guitar solos, and have more guitar solos in their songs. There are only 5 on this album, and I think that every song needed one pretty much. And if they aren't going to have a guitar solo, have some sort of an instrumental break where something's happening to give the listener something else to hear besides just the singer. And the singer's got a good voice, but it's nice to have a break where you just get some instrumental stuff going on every now and again. I also am not a big fan of the order of these tracks. I thought Swallow wasn't really the best way to open an album, and I thought we get quite a bit of melodic tracks from Black Halo through Shallow Side. Everything seems pretty melodic during that stretch of the album, and then we get 2 kind of heavier tracks to end the album. I think We All Die Young would have been an interesting opening track for the album. Maybe put Shallow Side as the final track on the album. That or Black Halo. I think one of those would have worked really well as the final track. I'm thinking more Shallow Side than anything else, since Black Halo is such a departure in terms of sound. It probably is a nice interlude to have somewhere in there. And I also would have liked to have had the last 2 tracks mixed in with some of the mellower tracks just to break things up a little bit more. But other than that, it is still a solid album. I do highly recommend checking out these guys if you're a fan of some of the other bands I mentioned earlier, Disturbed, Godsmack, Alter Bridge. They're certainly worth a listen. I just see a lot of potential in these guys if they can up the ante, and especially in terms of guitar playing. I'm going to give this album a 7 out of 10. I think it's still pretty dang solid. It doesn't really ever reach great status, but it never gets below listenable. It's very consistent and definitely worth your time. And I really look forward to what these guys do next. I just hope that they continue to build on what they've been doing and don't regress.